afternoon, Rotarians and friends and guests. I am Becky Fields, and it is my honor and privilege to welcome you as president of this great Rotary Club of Tulsa. We have a full, exciting meeting today, so let's get started. We'll begin our program with invocation from Prima Donna Braddock, a special solo a cappella rendition of the national anthem from Phil Armstrong. Be ready for goosebumps. And new member introductions from past president Chuck Wilson.
To our Creator, bless all those gathered here today as we come together in friendship and fellowship. Thank you for blessings of the individual and collective God-given gifts. Place in our hearts the desire to make a difference in our community, to our country, and to the many cultures and peoples around the world. Give us balance in the times of distraction and uncertainty. Help us move towards our goals with determination, and always with an abundant sense of humor. Thank you for the food in a world where many know only hunger, for our faith in a world where many know fear, for friends in the world where many know only loneliness. Please bless this food we are about to share, those who prepared it, those who served it, and those who have worked to make today a special occasion that it is. For all of this, we give you thanks. Amen.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free? And the home of the brave. Thank you. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
I'd like to sing the second verse for you, if you don't mind. No, you wouldn't want to hear that. We have a special designation referred to as corporate membership. One of the leaders of the organization is the corporate member, while another key member of management team serves as a full-fledged member of our club. There is a special designation for corporate member, including a club sponsorship. So I am pleased to introduce Hearts for Hearing, whose mission is to create life-changing opportunities for children and adults with hearing loss to listen for a lifetime. Founded in 2003, Hearts for Hearing became a comprehensive health clinic for both children and adults with special emphasis on outcomes for children. Headquartered in Oklahoma City with an office opened in Tulsa just last year. So, I would like for you to meet Joanna Trimble Smith, is the co-founder and chief executive officer of Hearts for Hearing. As a speech-language pathologist, Joanna has spent her 42-year career in Oklahoma improving the lives of children and adults with hearing loss or communication delays, as well as developing a model for special delivery or service delivery that is being replicated across the country. Under her leadership, the organization has grown from 18 employees in 2007 to 90 in 2019, with an annual budget of almost $12 million. In April of 2019, Hearts for Hearing opened a comprehensive clinic in Tulsa at Legacy Plaza to meet the demand for quality hearing health care in this part of the state. A unique detail in her life is the fact that 2 of her children were delivered in an airport. Their daughters are both Korean-born and were adopted through Dylan many years ago. Now, Dr. Arun Joshi is an audiologist at Hearts for Hearing in Tulsa, where he manages the audiology clinic. As a licensed audiologist, he specializes in cochlear implants and infant electrophysiological assessments. You need to be licensed just to say that. Arun obtained a clinical doctorate from the University of North Texas in 2017 and received his undergraduate degree from the University of Texas at Austin. While in graduate school, he served as the president for the Student Academy of Audiology and as a university liaison for the Academy of Doctors of Audiology Virtual Student Council. Arun is an active member of the Oklahoma Speech Language Hearing Association and serves on several committees within the American Academy of Audiology. He was recently honored as an Achiever Under 40 by the Journal Record as a result of his commitment to expanding high-quality hearing health care to Tulsa and Northeast Oklahoma. Outside of work, he enjoys spending time with his family, traveling the world, and I am so sorry to tell you, rooting for University of Texas football. Now, Arun, we have a signal here in Oklahoma that's just especially made for people like you, and it's this one right here. So would you please rise and welcome our newest members? So glad to have you.
Welcome, Arun and Joanna. We are so excited to have you in a club. What a great organization. My niece was actually a recipient of some of your cochlear implants, and she's a thriving freshman in high school now, thanks to your services, and so our family really appreciates you. I would like to really quickly recognize our visitors. Usually we do name-by-name introductions, but it's such a full room today. Would all of our visitors just please stand today with the Rotarian that brought you, and we'd just like to welcome you today. Thank you so much for coming, and feel free to come back anytime. We would love to have you. It was a crisp spring morning, and I ran down the steps of my house out of the yard and turned right onto the sidewalk where I was going out for my normal morning jog. I was so excited because the sunrise was just starting to come up, the birds were chirping, and I was taking in the fresh Wait, that was not fresh air. That smelled a lot like garbage, and indeed, I realized I was following the garbage truck down the road in front of my house. Well, I started to get really annoyed because this was my time. This is my alone time. This is the time I love to think and process and just be, have less stress in my life and have less telephones ringing, right? Where you don't have to hear that all the time. So I was just so excited about the day, and then I just instantly got mad. And then I thought, oh my word, they're in my way, what are they doing? And all of a sudden they stopped for a pickup. And I thought, oh good, I will catch them, overtake them, and get past this smell. So I started sprinting, and I will use sprint in quotes, that is used very loosely. I was running as fast as I could to catch them. I almost had caught them, and then those guys are fast. They did the trash, they hopped back on the truck, and off they went. And they pulled off in front of me again. Here I am huffing and puffing even harder now, trying to catch them, thinking, this is ruining my day. If this doesn't change soon, I'm gonna just turn around and go back home. I might as well just give it up. Why do I even try? Why do I even bother? And so, again, he stopped, and I thought, here's my chance. Here's my break in the road. I'm going to catch them. So this time I just start sprinting as hard as I can. I'm going and going. And those guys, again, so fast. Whoever hired them, they're amazing. They're on task on their job. Got back on the truck and went again. Well, at that point, I'm thinking, I'm turning around and going back. This is ridiculous. And as soon as I started to turn around and go back, I thought, I could go down another road. And so I saw a road to the right, and I just turned off my normal path that I always go on. And I started going, and I kind of was chuckling to myself. I thought, really? You just kept following that garbage truck with the bad smells, and all you wanted to do was complain about it. And I was thinking, that is how it is oftentimes in life. We get stuck in all of our stinking thinking, and I don't know about you, but sometimes here's how my stinking thinking goes a little bit inside my brain. People are too busy for Rotary. They don't know what we have to offer. They don't understand the value in what we do. This is too hard. I can't do it. How can one person make an impact? Or in work, I don't have enough clients. Or in work, I have too many clients. I'm too busy. I don't have enough time. And also, why try? After watching the news, I get depressed, and I don't even know if we're making a difference in the world. So sometimes I have to stop following the garbage truck around in my mind and turn on a better thought. And so here are some of the better thoughts that I try to pump into my mind. I was made for such a time of this. Rotary has so much to offer its members and the community. Our effort is worth the struggle as we become stronger and better at what we do. Rotary is the bright ray of hope that the world needs right now. I have plenty of time and energy to get everything in my life done that I need to get done. So when we choose our thoughts, which roads we want to run on and which we want to deter from, we can achieve so much more and actually enjoy the journey along the way. And now, in club announcements for the day, I would first like to thank this week's sponsors, Joe Moore with Moore Funeral Home and Michael Hairston with the Trust Company of Oklahoma. Thank you, guys. In other announcements, we have a committee meeting talking about all things membership retention upstairs in room 231 immediately following the Rotary program today. And in upcoming programs, we have Rena Cook with Vocal Authority on September 11th. I would also love to give you a quick update on our newest event for Rotary called Rhythm and Brews. And let me tell you, this has taken on a whole new life of its own. What we started with a dream has completely evolved into something bigger and better than we ever imagined. And I want to thank Monica Martin, our event chair, and our committee that has just really worked on this and really kept with it, even when it was hard, whenever we thought, what are we doing? Is this even going to make an impact? And it is, you guys. I want to make sure that you know that tickets are on sale now on DACDB, and also sponsorships are available. So make sure and see Monica afterward, or one of her team members on the committee will be out there to give you the information and the breakdown on all that is included. Because the really amazing thing is we start the day off with a brunch at the gathering place in the boathouse, which will be a beautiful view over the park. And what is very exciting about that is it will have a really neat array of foods and things for you to taste from, and entertainment. But the news is there are only 300 seats for the brunch. So I just need you all to be aware that we will have to cut off just because of space limitations. So please be sure to get your tickets early for that. The good news is the park can have 50,000 people. So I don't know if we'll be housing that many people that day, but we're definitely planning on several thousand. And so the festival will go all day until 8 p.m. So the brunch starts at 11 to 1, and then the rest of the festival will be open to the public and everyone else with a regular ticket from 2 to 8. So just make sure and stop by and see Monica and get all the great details. You definitely don't want to miss out being on the ground floor of this historic event. We are very excited about this. All right, so one more club announcement, and that has to do with district conference coming up in September. We are going to kick off this year with an exciting new thing. Rotaract's Wine, Cheese, and Chocolate will be the night before the festivities start, so make sure and join us for the Rotaract Wine, Cheese, and Chocolate. And then on Friday, the 27th, is when the annual district golf tournament will take place. And then that night is when we will have and host, the Rotary Club of Tulsa will be hosting the tailgate party along with the Rotary Club of Bixby for the entire district. So we just want to show welcoming to all of our four-state area Rotarians that will be joining us in Tulsa, and they're getting information this week on all the wonderful things that they can do here in Tulsa. So I want us to make sure and turn out and really show them a really big Tulsa welcome. And then on Saturday, the 28th, is the actual assembly, and everyone is invited. A lot of people think this is just for leadership, the board members or the chair, and you can be a member of any Rotary Club to attend, and on DACDB is all the information you need to get tickets for that. Also, in other news, we have our September volunteer opportunity for service above self. We are going to be helping the Sunrise Rotary Club. They'll be doing a blood drive on September 11th. And if you have any questions about that, you can get with Jan Lobb, our Service Above Self Director, and she'll give you information. If you cannot attend the blood drive on that day, she has information on where you can go to make sure and get included in that. That is a wonderful day to give back to our country and to people in need of that wonderful resource. Let's see, what else? Oh, it's fall. Are you ready for some football? I know in my household, that's what we're all tuned to right now. So every Wednesday at Rotary from here on out, because of the blessing of Tim Nall and We Be Trees, he gives us tickets every year to OU and OSU games. And so you'll want to go out in the lobby afterwards. Every single week, we will have a chance that you can bid on the game. So this Saturday, September 7th, OU versus South Dakota. Boomer? Oh my goodness, Boomer. Okay, thank you. That scared me for a second. Okay, and then there's another team that plays, OSU, also plays on Saturday. There you go, pistols firing. All right, and a very exciting announcement that we have now from Corey Nickerson with the Crescendo Music Award grants and a presentation.
And as you know, no musician travels without an entourage. Entourage, come forward. Crescendo Music Awards Grants is a spin-off of our earlier Crescendo Music Awards. Over a 16-year period, we gave away over $460,000 in a competition kind of thing, and then turned around and found out that we had raised about that much money and it was sitting over in a fund. So we have redeveloped, retooled, and Crescendo Music Awards is now a grants program. And so you were all amazed at the number of guests we had at this table. We paid them to come. The Tulsa Honors Orchestra has been in existence for 40 years and has 3 orchestras serving 75 students. THO serves many students who are in the Tulsa public schools and in the greater Tulsa area who cannot afford lessons. They performed 12 times this past year, which is more performances than most school orchestra programs. One of the orchestras, the Chamber Orchestra, serving 25 advanced students under the leadership of Karen Harmon and Terry Pollock, is being expanded to include the authentic sounds of the Baroque era. The Baroque was the period of Bach, Vivaldi, Handel, and Purcell, and instruments of that day carried a unique sound and flavor that has gone somewhat dormant as instrument manufacturing and string production has changed over time. A Crescendo Music Awards grant in the amount of $4,500 has been awarded to Tulsa Honors Baroque Orchestra for the purchase of Baroque strings and bows and added coaching. It's a distinct honor to present this check to Karen Harmon and the Tulsa Honors Orchestra.
Lydia Gray is a soprano resident artist with the Tulsa Opera and an adjunct professor of voice with Oral Roberts University. She performs regularly with Theater Tulsa and has been an accompanist with the Tulsa Ballet. She continues to pursue her hopes of a career in opera. Lydia applied for a Crescendo Music Awards grant towards her 2019-2020 opera audition season. The grant funds will be applied to application fees, travel expenses, recording, website materials, accompanist and coaching fees, and primarily for summer festival and young artist positions in the U.S. and a few in Europe. On behalf of the Rotary Club of Tulsa, Lydia Gray receives a Crescendo Music Art Awards grant in the amount of $4,500.
Hello, I'm here with a legend in the Tulsa music education scene. Ron Wheeler has been conducting the Tulsa Youth Symphony since 1972, including myself way back in the 1990s. Thank you. The Tulsa Youth Symphony is being awarded a grant in the amount of $9,750 to do two amazing things. One, they have hundreds of students every Sunday throughout the school year in 3 different orchestras, and they're going to use some of this money to hire a woodwinds and brass specialist to work with students in small groups. Secondly, they are going to use money to study and send a couple of staff members to our sister city in Celle, Germany, to prepare to send students the following year and to really build a program in partnership with some musical institutions in our sister city in Germany for the future. And we thought in terms of Rotary's mission, youth exchange, international friendships and goodwill, it really fit well with the Rotary mission. We are thrilled to present this check for $9,750 to the Tulsa Youth Symphony.
If you've been in Tulsa at least 5 or 10 years, you are aware of Donald Ryan and Baron Ryan, the Ryan and Ryan duo, father and son pianist. Baron is an exciting young artist, composer, arranger, and performer. And we asked Baron to write his own introduction today. So here's what he said of himself. Baron Ryan is a pianist, composer, and educator whose ultimate goal is to use his craft to inspire others to be the best versions of themselves. He will use his Crescendo Music Awards grant to travel to and perform at performing arts conferences in North Carolina and New York City, where educators and concert presenters from across the country will instantly be won over by his skill and charm and invite him to work with their communities. I am proud today and excited to present to Baron this check from the Crescendo Music Awards Grants Committee of $5,000.
We just gave away $24,750. Now, if we do that every year for the next 20 years, we will have depleted the fund. If you help us raise about $20,000 a year, we can go on forever. So just so you know, Crescendo Music Awards Grants is alive and well, doing very well. Thank you for your support.
Wow, what a legacy, and I am so excited that we're involved in this. Thank you, Corey and team, for getting this together today. This is very exciting. I'd like to introduce the Rotarian of the Day at this time, Roger Ramsayer. Roger serves as Vice President and Market Leader for Cox Communications Operations in Northeast Oklahoma. Before coming to Cox, Roger served as Managing Director of Global Government and Public Affairs, Corporate Communications for Koch Industries in Wichita, Kansas. Roger worked for Bank 4 and Nations Bank, now Bank of America, for 12 years. Roger is a member of the Board of Directors of the Tulsa Regional Chamber of Commerce, where he will serve as Board Chairman in 2020. He also serves on the board of Oklahoma BizPac, is a Paul Harris Fellow, and is a trustee for the Tulsa Community College Foundation, for which he is chairing Tulsa Community College's annual Vision Dinner on September 19th at the Cox Business Center at an event honoring Commissioner and Rotarian Karen Keith, if anyone wants to buy tickets. Good work, Roger. Roger served as president of the Rotary Club of Wichita, which at the time was the 17th largest Rotary Club in the world. He holds a BS in business from the University of Kansas and an MBA from the University of Texas at Austin. Roger and his wife Terry have 2 children, both of whom are graduates of Oklahoma State University. Please help me welcome Roger Ramsayer.
Thank you so much, Becky. We are honored and enlightened to have with us this afternoon Senator James Lankford, who will give us an update on issues of national interest. Now, Senator, we have to apologize if you were made to feel unwelcome by our past president, Chuck Wilson, earlier, who not only insulted our newest member, being a University of Texas graduate, but as you noted, I have one as well. And a little known fact about the senator, he also has a degree from that fine institution. The senator and I redeemed ourselves, though, because we both sent our daughters to Oklahoma State, and I don't know, what we're going to have to do with our newest member. After serving for 4 years in the United States House of Representatives, Senator Lankford was elected to the United States Senate 5 years ago to fill the then remaining 2 years of the term of Senator Tom Coburn. Senator Lankford sits on the Senate Committee for Homeland Security and Government Affairs, and he serves as chairman of the Senate Subcommittee on Regulatory Affairs and Federal Management, a leadership post for which he is very well known in his quest to fight overly burdensome and unproductive regulation. Senator Lankford was recognized as the Senate's top-ranked taxpayer's friend by the National Taxpayers Union for his record in support of lower taxes, limited government, and economic freedom. Before his time in Congress, the senator served as director of student ministries for the Baptist Convention of Oklahoma and director of the Falls Creek Youth Camp, the largest youth camp in the nation with more than 50,000 energetic campers each summer. Wow. James and his wife, Cindy, have been married for 27 years and have 2 daughters, Hannah and Jordan. Senator Lankford is both a humble and effective statesman who commands great respect on both sides of the aisle because of how he respects and honors those with whom he disagrees. When I first had a chance to meet him 4.5 years ago, I was struck by how grounded he is in his unwavering core values, which are based on his personal faith, local decision-making, and opportunity for all citizens, regardless of their race, ethnicity, or background. Rotarians, please join me in giving a warm Rotary welcome to our Senator, James Lankford.
Bill, thank you. It is great to be back here at the club again. Where's Joanna? Right there you are. Joanna, you know my wife, Cindy. She was on the board at Hearts for Hearing, so I'm so glad you plugged in here as well. And she is such a fan of the work that Hearts for Hearing does as a fellow speech-language pathologist and as someone who's very passionate about the work. So thanks for y'all being a part here and for what you're doing all over the state right now. Y'all, let me just make some very brief comments, if that's possible for anyone in the Senate to do. And then I want to open this up to some questions because I'd love to be able to hear some of your thoughts, some things that you may be picking up, things that you've got questions on, what's happening, what's not happening. This time period right now during August and this first week of September, this is the 1 month a year that we are not voting in D.C. So it is nice to be able to be home and to be able to be around. So the other 11 months of the year, I'm in D.C. most of the time, and we're going through the process, and we'll be right back to that starting next Monday. So as I jokingly say to folks, watch your wallet starting next Monday, because we're back in session again. But the process, you can see, and you've heard a lot. There's a lot of things that are moving right now and some things that are not moving. So let me give you a little snippet of some conversation that will happen starting next Monday and some of the things that are moving. Obviously, budget is front and center. A large focus of where we have been as a country is trying to be able to figure out how we do budgeting. There's a bipartisan group that started meeting last year, which I'm a part of, that's trying to fix the budget process. Every year we say the same thing. How come the budget process didn't work again? In 1974, right after Watergate, Congress created what was called the 1974 Budget Act. We have functioned under that structure since 1974. Since 1974, there have been a total of 4 years that it has actually worked as designed. 4 times since 1974. We've got to change the process of how we do budgeting and appropriations. This is never going to get better. And every year, everyone says, well, next year we'll get it right. Next year we'll get it right. The process that was designed in 1974 does not work right. I tell people in D.C., we're not wearing the same ties we wore in 1974. We shouldn't be using the same budget process we used in 1974. We've got to be able to fix this, and there's a bipartisan group working to be able to help resolve this. There's some very basic things. We work on a fiscal year. Ending the 30th of September, so the new fiscal year beginning October the 1st. That may work fine in business and in some places. In a time where there's an election like this year, when the House changed over from a Republican to Democrat, that meant all new leaders, all new staff, all new transitions in all the committees. The House wasn't even up to speed until late in the spring to be able to get going. That's typical in the churn. That already means you're 4 months behind. Anytime there's a presidential election, you can be assured in that transition year, they'll be 4 or 5 months behind. We've got to be able to fix some of the process elements on it as well. I have a bill called the Government Shutdown Prevention. It is foolish that we continue to have government shutdowns in America. We're the largest economy in the world. We are the government that the rest of the world looks at, and though we always argue about our governmental system, anywhere you travel in the rest of the world, they still look to us. We have got to fix our structure so we're not having government shutdowns. We've had 21 government shutdowns since 1974. 21. People forget that Tip O'Neill shut the government down 3 times on Ronald Reagan when they were arguing in the 1980s. This is not new, but they're getting longer and they're getting worse. We've got to stop them entirely. I have a bipartisan bill with Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire that is a very simple, straightforward process on this. We've got to do all the appropriations work. So the simple way to be able to do this that we think is to be able to, when you get to the end of the fiscal year, if things aren't resolved at that point, do what's called a continuing resolution. It continues the funding the exact same as last year, not up, not down, exactly the same as last year, so federal workers aren't affected, the American people aren't affected, but at the same time, because we have to get a new budget in place, you can't just function under last year's old budget, you have to get a new one in place. In that time period that you have that continuing resolution functioning, members of Congress cannot travel, and we have what's called an automatic quorum call every day of the week. Weekdays, weekends, we stay in session until the new budget work is done. Now you may say, well, that's no big deal. Really? I jokingly tell my colleagues there's nothing we like more than seeing each other less. And having us all basically in the same room every single day, weekends and weekdays, until the budget work is done, is a pretty powerful motivator to be able to get the budget work done. If you tell 535 members of Congress you can't go home and see your family, you can't travel around your state and do town hall meetings, you can't get out and about and do the rest of the work, you can't do CODELs, you can't do anything else until this budget work is done, it'll get done. Because after about 2 weeks of us all being in session every single day, we will all look at each other and say, let's get this resolved. That is to the benefit of the American people to try to get that done. Now, Maggie and I have worked on that. We have passed it through the first committee. It's headed to the second committee. We have strong bipartisan support, and we hope to get that done to end government shutdowns entirely in the days ahead. We've still got 12 appropriation bills that are sitting out there. Those bills will have to go through the Senate committee work and then onto the floor of the Senate, get passed by the Senate, then get conferenced with the House. That all has to be done by the 30th of September. How many people in this room believe the House and the Senate can pass 12 bills dealing with $1 trillion in spending in the next 3 weeks? Me either. So when we get to September the 30th, there will be some kind of resolution there for a short-term resolution to be able to spend a couple of months to be able to extend that out. That is why I think Maggie and I, that's why our bill is so important, to make sure that when we get to September the 30th, there's not the CNN countdown clock of imminent doom and shutdown pending happening, that we tell the federal workers and their families, you're not going to be affected by this while we continue to be able to negotiate this out. So we'll see as that moves in the days ahead. I wish I could tell you there's an immigration bill pending. There's not. There's not a deadline for immigration. Everyone sees the problems. Everyone sees the issues. There's wide bipartisan support for quite a few areas, but there are some areas there's not support on, and so it just keeps getting punted. There's a group of us that have met now for several years to be able to talk about where do we have common ground that we can move on immigration so we can get a bill together. So by the time that we get to a moment that we do have that moment of a vote, we're prepared for that. But there's not going to be a big shift. In July, I went down to the border, went to McAllen, Texas. In the area around McAllen, 40% of all the people that illegally cross that 2,000-mile-long border between Mexico and the United States, 40% of those all come in around McAllen, Texas. In that one area, they have between 1,500 to 2,000 people a day illegally crossing, a day. Went to 5 different locations, wanted to be able to see how they were doing housing, how they were doing the process, how they were processing paperwork, wanted to be able to get eyes on it myself and to be able to go through that. Did a ride along that night with 2 different sets of Border Patrol agents to be able to see at night how they actually handle interdictions and what's actually moving and what's not moving. Had the opportunity to be able to see through those and brought back a whole set of ideas to say, here's some things that need to be resolved. One of them caught me by surprise, and that is the issue of ICE. There has been this national conversation about abolishing ICE or defunding ICE and saying ICE is the problem, and so we want to take funding away from them. And then for the past couple of years, we've had a real difficulty getting additional funding to ICE. Well, what I didn't expect is when I got to the border area, the Border Patrol agents, when I said, what do you need to be able to help you do a better job here? Their first response was additional funding for ICE, a different entity. And I said, okay, so tell me why. Border Patrol is kind of like a police station. When someone's arrested, they're picked up, their paperwork is processed there. Most people in a Border Patrol station spend less than 24 hours there, but they're handed over to ICE for a longer-term detention. With no additional funding for ICE, we have tens of thousands of people that are crossing the border, and they're backing up in Border Patrol stations, and there's nowhere to keep them. And so they're literally stacking up in the stations, waiting for additional bed space to be able to be opened up. The Border Patrol agents aren't trained for long-term taking care of people. They're processing paperwork, and then they're passing it on to ICE, who is set up and trained for detention. But with no additional funding for ICE, that means all of those folks are backing up at the border, and they're not getting out to much better facilities that would be in the country with people that are trained long-term on how to be able to handle detention. We've got to do both. Now, that's an issue that's not obvious on how to be able to solve some of the humanitarian crises at the border, is to get additional funding to ICE, but it is most definitely one of the areas that needs to be addressed. I'd be glad to be able to talk in greater depth on any of those issues if you'd like to be able to talk about it more. One other thing that I want to be able to bring up, and then let me open this up for questions. We started through this past January a conversation about prescription drugs and prescription drug pricing. I serve on the Finance Committee, which handles all of Medicare, Medicaid, social services, all the different tax policy and things that we have as a nation. We started in January going through all these different hearings, trying to be able to evaluate the cost of prescription drugs and why we've seen the dramatic increase in some drugs, a decrease in others, and other drugs are staying flat. We started breaking it down into groups. We first met with CEOs of the 7 of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world to be able to talk about how they do pricing and what their process is. We met with insurance companies. We've met with different groups, including a group most folks have never heard of called the Pharmacy Benefit Managers. They're the behind-the-scenes group in between the pharmaceutical companies and the insurance companies. They actually negotiate all of those formularies that we see there and what drugs actually come to market. And we started trying to identify where are there problems in the system. We brought a bill forward in July. That bill actually moved through committee. It has a bunch of new amendments that will be added into it this fall, and we hope to be able to finalize that. It's not been a partisan bill. It's been an issue of how do we actually try to resolve this problem, and it's been really healthy, good debate. We've identified multiple areas. In fact, my office in particular, we've worked through an area called tiering that most folks have not heard of, but the more we dug on it, the more we discovered that when a new drug, let's say a generic drug, comes to market, when that generic drug gets approved, and most folks know that a branded drug is allowed to have their brand for 10 to 12 years or so exclusively, then after that time period, then generics can step in the market. Here's the problem, though. When the generic drug is about to start being launched, the brand companies, the pharmaceutical companies, will work with the pharmacy benefit managers behind the scenes and will say, we will pay you a rebate. Insert the word kickback here. We will pay you a rebate if you will not list the generic competition on your formulary. Or we'll pay you a slightly less of a rebate if you'll list the generic on the same tier as the brand. You may say, well, what difference does that make? Many of you may have a pharmacy plan that when you go to the pharmacy, it may be $5 or $10 for a generic or $35 or $50 for a brand. And so you make your decisions often based on what it's going to cost you out of pocket. Well, if the brand name drug can get the generic drug listed in the brand name tier, when you go to the pharmacy and say, I'd like to get the generic for this, the pharmacist says, sure, I can get you the generic, but it's the same cost as the brand. It'll still be your $50 deductible. Most people will say, well, just give me the brand then, not knowing that behind the scenes, the insurance company is going to pay an extra $500 back to that company because it's the same price to you. And the brand name companies know it, and the pharmaceutical companies are negotiating with the PBMs to keep those things of the generic and the brand on the same tier. We're going to stop that to be able to make sure the consumer has access to the generic drugs at the cheaper price. There are a whole series of issues like that. We've got multiples dealing with the prescription drugs. And I have folks say, how do you solve the prescription drug method and the pricing issue? It's not one issue, it's a whole host of issues. It's kind of like, how do you solve immigration? No one thing is going to deal with immigration issues. It's going to be a whole host of things that have to be able to be resolved because there's lots of problems in that. So we're going to try to be able to work through that and to get a set of solutions into our law by this fall as well. All right, let me open this up. What would y'all like to talk about? Those issues or something else? There's a microphone right in the middle if you want to be able to take it as well. Go ahead and step on up there. State your full name, your bank PIN number, your social security number.
Thank you. I'm Kevin Murray.
Hey, Kevin.
I'm excited to hear about your efforts to fix the budget process.
Yeah.
What's your biggest obstacle? Who's fighting you on that?
Status quo. Honestly, it's not one person. It's that every time you make a change on anything in D.C., everyone says, well, there could be a problem in the potential, so let's just stick with the problems that we have now rather than the potential problems in the future on something else. Fighting the status quo is a real deal in D.C. Because the inertia to just keep it the same is our biggest battle. But we're trying to be able to work through this. Again, there's a group of Republicans and Democrats alike on this. Michael Bennet, Democrat from Colorado, Whitehouse, who's a Democrat from Rhode Island, myself, David Perdue from Georgia is a Republican from Georgia, Mike Enzi, a Republican from Wyoming. We're all working on this together. And people wouldn't believe that we are. We are. Because we want a revenue-neutral process that's not trying to design what the outcome's going to be, but it's a better process to get a better product on it. But just the inertia of everyone saying, that seems complicated, let's just keep what we have that's not working, is the problem. Both sides of the aisle. What else? Karen, you're not going to ask me about Corps of Engineers, are you? Go ahead, Karen.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that you had boots on the ground with us during the high water event. But can you talk about how you, like you're doing the prescription drug issue, you're kind of digging into what you perceive as some of the issues in the way the Corps is run?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. Thanks for all your work as well, and for a lot of other folks during all the flooding of this past spring. This is not new to Green Country, that we have lots of rain and that we have issues managing. When I met with the Corps early on during the flood events, my comment to them was, we're going to have an after-action report on this. We're going to break down all the numbers. We're going to go through everything day by day, how much water was coming into different bodies, how much was going out, what was happening in Kansas, what was happening in Arkansas, because the entire system was being affected by this. And obviously, a lot of our homes and businesses were being affected by it. Today is actually, ironically enough, today is actually the day of that after-action report. And we've got all the data all pulled together, and we're going to start working our way through it day by day. I've identified multiple days, especially in May, that there was a tremendous amount of water coming into Keystone, and there was a very low amount that was being released. That we were already above flood stage even before the flood event actually occurred. So I've got questions of why. Why was that done that way? Downstream, they weren't experiencing flooding. Up in Kansas, even at that time period, they were already experiencing flooding. We knew water was already coming this direction already. So why weren't we doing faster releases? So what I'm looking for is not excuses, but why were decisions made on the day that it was made? Was it made locally? Was it made regionally by a regional office? Was it made by DC office? Was it a restriction that was done in law? Is it a regulation from the Corps of Engineers? The Corps often functions based on fear of lawsuits, saying if we do X, that's different than how we did it last time, so if we change structure, we're going to get a lawsuit, and so we're just not going to change structure. We got to be able to solve those things. And so today is laying out facts, laying out what are the key moments of decisions, who made the decision, how were they made, and how do we make this better for the next time. Because we can look a lot in the rearview mirror and see what happened, but it's not going to help us if we can't actually fix it for the future. So we've got several hours together today on that. Yes, sir. If you couldn't hear John's question, it was, should we give up fighting the national deficit? No, we should not give that up. We're at, brace yourself if you haven't heard this number, $22 trillion in total debt. Now, there's two different terms that are out there, deficit and debt. Deficit is overspending in 1 year. Debt is the collection of all those deficits over time. So our overspending for a single year is approaching $1 trillion again. Overspending in a single year. Most of that overspending is things that was forecast decades ago. We're now at a point more and more people are retiring, and we have fewer and fewer people in the workforce that are younger. We knew this decades ago that we were going to have more and more people in Social Security that were going to start receiving benefits, more and more people on Medicare receiving benefits. This was predictable, but nothing was done decades ago, nothing was done last decade, nothing was done last week to be able to solve it. It was just everyone saw the slow train wreck coming financially, but there's nothing that was really done about it. So interest payments are right now about $300 billion a year on our total debt. That's money that we can't put into infrastructure. That's money that we can't put into other areas because we're spending $300 billion. By the way, I don't know if you can process $22 trillion, but here's what I tried to do on it. I put 22 trillion into 22 trillion miles to try to get a picture of how far is 22 trillion miles. 22 trillion is the distance between Earth and Pluto and back 3,081 times. That's 22 trillion miles. We have $22 trillion in total debt. If you took the income of every single person in all of the United States for an entire year, we could not cover our debt. So the issue is, what do you do about it? So there's a couple of things that I'm trying to do. And again, I talked about this bipartisan working group. We've got to fix our process because there's no plan. One of the things that I'm trying to create is what I affectionately call the 13th bill. We have 12 spending bills a year that have to be done every single year. But they're 12 spending bills. There's not a 13th savings bill out there. I want to create every session of Congress a bill that has to be done each session that is focused on what are we going to save. Now that Congress can determine if they're going to save $5 or $500 billion. But I think there should be debate every session of Congress on what are we saving. We've got 12 spending bills. We should have a built-in process for how we're going to actually save and what's going to occur with that. Now, there's a lot of process things that go into that, but that can be done. And we've had good support for that in a dialogue. But know that this is going to have to be chipped away. This is not a mortgage. This is a mega jumbo mortgage. And we're going to have to chip away at this for well over a decade to be able to get it back under control. And first, we've got to have a real focus to actually do it. So we're just trying to right now to build a difference in process and build a coalition of people that actually want to work on it. But no, we shouldn't give up. It's a race to the mic.
You sort of assumed the mantle from Tom Coburn on attacking government waste, fraud, and abuse. Can you tell us what's happening on that front now? Is there something still happening there, and is it significant?
Yeah, it is. I would say there aren't two Tom Coburns, so it's nice of you to say I've assumed the mantle, but there aren't two of those gentlemen. So I'll just stick with being James and keep going from there. But we do have a responsibility as an office to be able to focus on what do we do on waste, fraud, and abuse and what I call just inefficiency of government. We have a book we put out every year called Federal Fumbles. That identifies things that we have seen in the past year and ways to solve those things that we've seen in the past year. Sometimes it's overspending. Sometimes it's just silly, ridiculous spending. We spent, as a government, for the past several years, a support for a mariachi band in California. Again, I have nothing against mariachi bands. I have nothing even against a one-time grant to be able to support an educational program, but it's year after year after year of federal dollars going into the same program. That's not a startup program anymore. That's ongoing sustaining of them. I think at some point you got to hand that off to the local community, like this community has done in the arts, that this community stepped up. There's no reason the people of Oklahoma should support the arts in our community and also an ongoing support for there in California. There are things like that that I look at and go, okay, this makes sense. One, it doesn't make sense year after year after year. This also, we look at it in some of the ways that we operate as a government and the structure of what we do. So we identify that. If anybody wants to be able to see those, we keep those online. You can just go to my website, langford.senate.gov, and we produce those book called Federal Fumbles. Now, the Federal Fumble book is not just a press release for us. We intentionally release those out to every Senate office and to say, here's a set of problems that we've seen, and here's the solution to each one of them that we've identified. If you have a different set of solutions, bring them. But we believe that every office should be doing the same thing and to be focused on the problems they've seen and the solutions that they would actually bring to it. It also becomes our to-do list for the next year. In fact, at the end of each year's book, we actually put the things that we've accomplished from the last year that we actually started last year and they actually got checked off and done for this next year. Because with a budget of $4 trillion a year in total federal spending, there will always be areas of inefficiency. But we should reduce those as much as we can. Who else is coming?
The Green New Deal is something many of us love to hate.
Yeah, for
How
good reason.
seriously should we in Oklahoma take whatever the implications of that might be?
So the Green New Deal is not just about being environmentally focused and friendly. I have no issue with that. Many of you know I'm a Christian. I have a Christian worldview. I believe the earth that we have, that we are responsible stewards of this earth. And we're to take care of what God has given us. We should have clean water. We should have clean air. We should get rid of toxins. I spent all day up in Tar Creek area just a few weeks ago going through the environmental cleanup that's still ongoing there. There are things that we should do. But the Green New Deal is not about just cleaning up our environment. It is a total takeover of the economy. When you read it, it has a whole section in it about providing more union jobs in America. I don't know what union jobs have to do with a better environment, but there's a whole section on that. Again, I'm not anti-union, but I just don't get why that's there. There's a whole section about the Medicare for All that's in there. The Medicare for All, don't be mistaken when you hear that term, that is about 180 million Americans who get their health care at work, losing their health care from work and shifting into a government system. That's what Medicare for All means. That is the employer-provided health care goes away. Again, I don't know what that has to do with the environment, but that is a section of the Green New Deal proposal. And then it walks through section by section of every type of energy either going away and setting dates on it and saying at some point we're going to force new technologies to be there. Now, I remember during the Carter administration and the focus on the transition of energy. For instance, during the Carter administration, there was a real focus to stop using natural gas because we were running out of natural gas. We need to shift as an economy to coal. Remember this during the Carter administration? We had lots of coal, so stop using natural gas and build more coal-fired plants. And so all across the country, there was a shift to more coal plants and a shift away from natural gas. Does anybody believe we're running out of natural gas now? We have so much natural gas, it is literally so cheap now that in West Texas, they just flare it all off because it costs more to transport it to where it can actually be processed than it does to actually be able to sell it because we have so much. When the federal government steps in and says, I can predict the future, you should be nervous. Because clearly, we as a government have not been effective at predicting the future and what will be out there as far as technology and finds that are out there in minerals and such. That's what the Green New Deal does. It predicts the future and says, I know what the future is going to be and I know what the right answer is for the future, and it's going to be all this. That I cannot buy into. and it's for practical reasons. And it's not a personal issue, it's a policy issue, because I've just seen how that works in the past. Somebody else just want to ask a question. Yes, sir. You're getting the last question I just heard from the front, so there's a lot of pressure on the last question.
All right, Senator, I'm Joe Moran, and my password is I love Darcy. Could you please talk about international trade, tariffs, and the impact that it's having on manufacturers and the U.S. consumer?
Yeah, I can, Joe. It's a great question. So President Trump came out early swinging hard for the fence on trade issues. Went after NAFTA immediately, which, by the way, NAFTA in Oklahoma has been a success for us. In Oklahoma, our number one trading partners are Canada and Mexico. There's a reason for that. It's because of NAFTA and what was done. Now, NAFTA desperately needed a revamp. NAFTA was done in the 1990s before e-commerce was a thing. So there's a lot of areas of NAFTA that we had to renegotiate based on e-commerce and a lot of intellectual property things. That's been done. This new trade deal now is called the USMCA, which I have to slow down. I have to think YMCA with a US instead of a Y every time to try to get it correctly. But the USMCA, that agreement now deals with a lot of the e-commerce, deals with a lot of the traffic, deals with a lot of the transportation, fixes some of the issues that we had with Canada. For instance, wheat that we sell here in the United States that my kids eat and you eat and our kids eat that do fine with. When that wheat goes into Canada, Canada always downgrades it to be livestock grade as soon as it crosses the border. So that means our wheat sells for a lot less in Canada than it's actually worth because the Canadians do protectionism by downgrading our wheat every time. This new agreement solves that issue. That's a big deal for Oklahoma and our agriculture to be able to do that. Whether it be cotton, whether it be wheat, whether it be soybeans, whether it be oil and gas, whether it be manufactured products, it's a win for us to be able to have a stable North American market because this is our prime market for trade for us. That agreement will come before the House. It could come any time. But because it has a revenue measure in it, constitutionally, it has to go in front of the House of Representatives first. This has been one of those contentious issues that in the past, Nancy Pelosi, when she was Speaker last time, she doesn't like free trade agreements and wouldn't bring them up. In fact, the free trade agreements that we have in place now that are current, after she left as speakership and John Boehner took on the role as Speaker, the free trade agreements all came up and overwhelmingly passed the Senate, and were signed into law by President Obama. But she wouldn't bring them up before. So the hope is that she'll bring this one up because it is a win for us economically to be able to have a stable trade environment in North America. So that hopefully will come up this fall. If it doesn't, it's only Democrats, and I'm not being partisan, but it's only Democrats in the House that can bring that up. I think if she will allow it to come up, I think it will pass. There's a whole group of O-line Democrats that are in the House that are at odds with the new Young Socialists that just got elected in the House. They're saying over and over again, I'm a Democrat, but I'm not one of those Democrats. And they want a chance to be able to vote on something that is free market capitalism, and they feel like this trade agreement is it. And they're trying to convince Pelosi to bring up the USMCA for a vote. They want to vote on it and pass it. If it comes up, if she'll bring it up, it'll pass. And then it'll move, and again, the Senate will have no problem passing. It'll move the president. That'll be done. The next big step is still this ongoing dialogue with China. China's not a trade agreement in the sense like the USMCA is. It's an executive agreement between our two countries, so it wouldn't have to go through ratification from Congress. The last 5 presidents have all tried to get a deal with China. China's been a problem for every president for the last 5, every one of them. So this is an issue for us to be resolved. And the president's fairly unorthodox on how he's taken this on, to say the least. But he is basically saying, everybody else has tried it a different way. I'm going to try it a different way than them and see if we can get China to come to the table. They started with 100 items that they listed out as problems in trade between the United States and China. They resolved 75 of those. We're down to the last 25. And then a couple of months ago, China came back and said, we want to start renegotiating the 75 we already agreed to. That's when the president came out. It came out as news that the president just suddenly started throwing tariffs on China. Behind the scenes was The Chinese were coming back to the trade negotiations saying, those 75 that we closed, we want to reopen. And he basically said, no way. We're not going to reopen what was closed. Those are closed. We've got to finish the last 25. Now there's a bunch of saber rattling back and forth on it. Trade with China is very important to us. But let me just say this. There are few places on earth that have a worse human rights record than China. If you're a Chinese citizen, you have what's called a social score, whereas a fiscal score. We're used to having a credit score. They have those in China as well. But China also has a social score for every person. The Chinese government tracks all their citizens, where they go, what they attend, the places they go, and their general agreement with the Central Communist Party. If they have disagreements with the Communist Party, they get a lower social score. If you get a lower social score, your kids can't get into school. You can't get a job. You can't use public transportation. You can't travel outside the country. If you have a high social score, you can travel to a new town. You can travel outside the country. Your kids can go to school. You can use public transportation. So people talk about how happy the Chinese are and how they all cooperate together. Yeah, they have to. Because if somebody doesn't, they get a low social score. Chinese students here in the United States have Chinese trackers on them. If they protest against the central government, their visa will be recalled and their family will get a low social score. Their parents then will not be able to keep a job, use transportation, attend, or move around. So yes, they have great compliance. We have got to stand up to a government that is that dominating and that oppressive of human rights of their people. So while we're working on the trade issues, and we should, because we trade with everyone all over the world, while we work on the trade issues, and we should also address the human rights issues in China as well. And to make sure that we stand up and say to the 2 million plus Uyghur Muslims that are there, that are currently in concentration camps and re-education facilities in China, that's not acceptable to a nation like ours to be able to cooperate and to be able to help a government that re-educates the Muslims in their country into a new Chinese way of thinking. So we need to make sure our negotiations are both. And that makes it messy in negotiations, but both are exceptionally important to us. I know it's a long answer, and there's a lot to it. But the tariffs issue, I hope they go away. And my conversation with the president is, he wants to see low or no tariffs. If that's the goal, that's a good goal. High tariffs should not be a goal for us. That hurts the American consumer and hurts our worldwide trade. Low and no tariffs should be the end goal. But we've got to keep China from stealing our intellectual property, and we've got to keep them from being that oppressive into their own people and to the people around them. Listen, I appreciate the dialogue. Can I introduce one person real quick? And I know it's after one. Come on up, and I'll make sure I go quickly. Where's Derek? Right there. Derek Osborne is my field representative for this area. I'm in D.C. more than I'm back home. You'll see Derek all over the place. If you want to get a hold of me, as odd as it sounds, get a hold of Derek. Derek and I talk every single week, whether I like it or not, which I do. Derek and I talk every single week. We stay in contact all the time. He can chase down for you all the different issues. So whether you have a question about veterans issues or immigration or Social Security or whatever it may be, if it has a federal nexus to it, get a hold of Derek, get his cell phone number. It's a federal cell phone, which means you pay for it. So you should have the number, right? Since you pay for it. So get his number, and when you have an issue, be able to call him, and we'll help track all that stuff down and to make sure that we can stay in contact. I want us to do this as a society. I have a lot of people that ask me, it was interesting today, no one did, but I have a lot of people that ask me just about the tone and tenor in Washington, D.C., and about how angry it's become. I hate to tell you, Washington, D.C. is a mirror to the country. It's not an anomaly. This is who we are. If we don't like what we see just in the tone and tenor, the best way to shift that is for us to make sure we shift. The best example I can say on that is go to any restaurant and go to their Yelp page and to see the comments on it. It's not even on politics anymore. We just seem to be angry about everything and caustic and critical of everybody. We can disagree and not be a jerk about it. We can engage in areas where we don't agree on something and see if we can't find a solution to the problem. But if we want to see that in DC, we've got to model it in our own homes, in our own communities, in our own Sunday school classes, in our own dialogues, in our own time around the table, and to make sure we're setting the tone. Because I'm absolutely convinced Washington doesn't change the country changes Washington. We're a democracy. It works the other way. And Washington reflects us right now. When we engage differently, DC will engage differently. And we can set the tone on that. I would be very pleased if Oklahoma sets the tone for the other 49 states. And our tone then starts getting replicated all over the country, and we shift back, because we've got big problems we got to address. It'd be best if we could all sit down in the room and really have dialogue and address them together as family members and neighbors. Would be the best way to be able to do that. So God bless you. Let's go set the example together.
Thank you so much, Senator Langford, for your time with us today and then also your service to our state and our great nation. Rotarians, I think we can set the tone, and I know that we are making a difference and we are agents of change. Now go change the world.